We're here to talk about this idea of learner agency. Now, learner agency speaks to the heart of what it means to be a human. The research behind it dates back to the 16th century, and it speaks to the nature of free will, our capacity to take action and change the world around us. The trouble is, though, it's rapidly becoming a buzzword. It's a word that until recently many people hadn't heard. And it's suddenly becoming something we've all got to do. We've got to do a little bit of learner agency. Learner agency is suddenly important. And the risk here is that the concept of learner agency will become one of those things that is really important this year and then not so important next year as we move on to the next new shiny thing. And I'm sure many of us in the room today can appreciate just how many things come through education like that. By the way, we'll know when that happens, when the idea of learner agency has gone from being something deep and rigorous to being something shallow and flippant. That'll happen when teachers start getting their professional learning from Pinterest. Because we know that's where it's happened in a lot of other areas, including mindset, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. That what should be and what is a deep and important subject has been, I won't say trivialised, but just smeared across the top, and we haven't really taken the depth behind it. So let's talk about what learner agency is all about. Learner agency, as I say, it speaks to this idea of having control over the world around you, about whether we have the choice to make a difference around us. And probably the easiest way to understand it is to think about what it isn't. Someone who lacks agency becomes the victim of their circumstance. The world acts on them. They feel at a loss. They feel like it's unfair. They'll say things like, why do these things happen to me? And that's sort of the way I think about it. When I think about people who lack agency, they're the victim of their circumstances and the world is happening to them. On the other hand, someone with agency takes control. They're the master, not the victim of their circumstances. And they are powerful rather than powerless in the face of change and adversity. And given the sort of world we know our children are growing up into, this volatile, uncertain, changeable, ambiguous world, this concept of agency, being able to control your circumstances, be the master of your environment, has come to the fore. There's a lot of definitions going around. We can talk about the way different states and nations are defining agency. But one of the things I've done for you is to bring some of that research together. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is in this document. Now, my wonderful assistant Jane is going to drop a link into the chat box right now to let you download this book. Now, this is a 28-page summary of the work behind learner agency, what it's all about, why it's important, and some of the key ideas that we need to keep in mind as we work with this idea in our schools. Now, I'm going to explore much of this today, but this will serve as your notes and your reference. Feel free to share this, and as you now look down below for the chat button and try and work out where the chat box is, there'll be a link in the chat box for you to download this. And as we go through the day, if you've got any questions about what I say or thoughts you want to contribute, pop them in the chat box as I'll glance across. My chat box is just over here. I'll just glance across from time to time and just check in to see where people are up to. For those of you watching the recording, there'll be a link to the Learner Agency book somewhere close to this recording for you. When I've gone through and I've looked at all the definitions that different schools, different organisations, different states and different countries are using for learner agency, it occurred to me that we needed something that's captured all those ideas together, a unifying definition. And the definition I came up with when I brought those together is this idea that learner agency is the degree to which an individual is able to take initiative and meaningfully influence their world particularly in the face of adversity. And we're going to come to the importance of adversity here. It involves three parts: the environment to act, the will to act, and the power to act. Now let's go through these just quickly, and then we'll dive into what it actually means in schools and classrooms. The first thing to notice about this definition is that agency comes in degrees. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's something you develop over time. It belongs to the learner, and it's not something you do to them. It's something that they develop within themselves. Agency is about taking initiative. There's an element of choice, an element of deciding that the world has happened, but I'm going to do something about it by doing this and this and this. And to meaningfully influence the world. This is not about doing trivial things, not about doing easy things. This is about being able to respond positively and meaningfully in that volatile, uncertain, changeable, and ambiguous world, that VUCA world that our students are growing up into. And I want to draw your attention to this idea that this is particularly in the face of adversity. Not about easy things, about being able to have control over difficult things. Because if we don't grasp that idea, if we're not clear that this is about helping students do more difficult things than they can do today, then we go down a path that leads us to voice and choice and ideas like that I'll explore in just a moment. I bring these ideas together, that definition together, around three core concepts. The first is the environment to act. Now, in the context of student agency or learner agency, we're talking about the school environment. Does the school provide an environment where students have choice? There are some environments, like prisons and places like that, where you have very, very limited choice and therefore very, very limited agency. If we don't have an environment in which we can exercise our choice, we don't have agency. The next part of the definition is to do with the will to act. Having the environment where you can have a choice and actually taking that choice are two separate things. The will to act is tied up closely with this idea of mindset. Carol Dweck's work on mindset. Now, I do a lot of work with mindset, but fundamentally, when the world happens to you, someone with a fixed mindset looks inside them and says, do I have the capabilities, the intelligence, the talents, the abilities to deal with this or not? And it's a yes/no answer. And if the answer is no, then you're going to be the victim of your circumstance. If the answer is, on the other hand, if you've got a growth mindset, you look inside yourself and say, well, I don't have the abilities at the moment. I will need to change to become the person who has the abilities. And so this will to act speaks to our mindset about whether or not we see the opportunity to become the person who can make the change in the world. But understanding that you can become the person that can make the change in the world and actually making that change are two very different things. And that's where this third part of the definition comes in, the power to act. It's not enough to know that you can make the choice. You've also got to understand how to make the change in yourself to become the person who can exercise that initiative and actually make the change in the world. So let's bring those three ideas together and look at them just one at a time.